A small town in Ternopil region is located on the picturesque banks of the River Horyn. The majestic palace once was the ancestral nest of one of the most famous princely families, Korybut-Vyshnivetsky. The castle's church is a family crypt with unique paintings by local artists, the ruins of an ancient church, and delicious local dishes. You can see all this in Vyshnivets when you visit this town.
Вітаю! Мене звати Юлія Цимбалюк, і сьогодні я буду вашим
Greetings! My name is Yulia Tsymbalyuk, and I will be your guide today. We are in the glorious town of Vyshnivets, in Zbaraj district of Ternopil region. The small town has a rich and fascinating history.
яке знало звитягу шляхтичів.
Here people celebrated the victory over the gentry received kings and emperors. The entire European nobility gathered here and international agreements were signed. It was here that Ukrainian and European elites were formed. A big hearty welcome to Vyshnivets.
Отож, радо вітаю вас у Вишнівці.
Vyshnivets is one of the ancient settlements in South Volyn. It is located on the left bank of the River Horyn. What is the origin of the name Vyshnivets? First and foremost, the Vyshnivetsky princes took their surname from the name of this town, Vyshnivets. There is such a folk version that there were many cherry gardens, and it's from here that the name Vyshnivets came. There's also a historical version that Vyshnivets from the word higher, height, and so it became the name of the town. Now we find ourselves on the territory of the castles of Ternopil, palace and park complex. It is here that the pearl of the Ternopil region is located, Vyshnivets Palace, which writer Honoré de Balzac called Little Versailles. We quite often call it Volyn's Versailles. The walls of Vyshnivets Palace know many different events, all kinds of adventures and a secret conspiracy to seize the throne to Moscow, brilliant victories and the bitterness of defeat. An interesting social life was in full swing here once upon a time, with balls and all kinds of receptions held here. All the emperors, kings and princes of Europe of those times visited the palace. We have a museum here now, which you should visit. I think that the value of the palace is not only that it is a historical and architectural landmark of a certain style, the Baroque style. We are proud of Vyshnivets Palace because there was a residence here from the end of the 15th century till the mid-18th century, the family home of our famous, influential Volyn clan of the Korybut-Vyshnevetsky princely family. Not only was the history of princes formed here, in the small town of Vyshnivets, but also the history of Ukraine and European history. And this was all because the Korybut-Vyshnevetsky princes were very influential in the political, economic and cultural life of our Ukrainian nation. The palace building has been preserved to this day almost unchanged, but the internal appearance has changed significantly. Of course, it is interesting to discover what Vyshnivets Palace was like in its heyday. The lavishness of the palace's interior was surprising. The rooms in the palace, there were more than 100, were named in accordance with the color of the walls, which were covered with Chinese silk decorated with beads, gold and silver. The huge collections of weapons, knightly armor, as well as a private collection of more than 2,000 paintings by prominent artists from the Middle Ages were preserved here.
Ми з вами знаходимося в головній залі Вишневецького палацу, дзеркальній залі, яка була відтворена минулого року в червні на кошти посольського фонду Сполучених Штатів Америки.
The golden age and the heyday of Vyshnivets Palace were in the second half of the 18th century. It was at this time that the palace became famous for its art collections. For the society of that time, the palace was not an architectural structure or even a family home, but a place where you could see the collections presented by its owners. We now find ourselves in the main hall of Vyshnivets Palace, in the Mirror Hall, which was reproduced with funds from the US Embassy with grant funds. We tried to reproduce this hall exactly as it was when it glorified Vyshnivets Palace in the second half of the 18th century.
Тому сьогодні ми пишаємося тим, що наші відвідувачі можуть побачити інтер'єри останнього з князів Вишневецьких.
At that time, Vyshnivets was called Volyn's Little Versailles. Many believe that the main creator of the project for this hall, both the customer and the founder, was the last representative of the Korybut-Vyshnivetsky family, Mikhailo Vyshnivetsky. Today this hall was opened in those very interiors that were opened during the lifetime of its founders. Photos helped to recreate the interior of this hall. These photos were taken during visits to Vyshnivets Palace by the famous architect Georgy Lukumsky. Of course, photos from the early part of the 20th century couldn't be perceived as a source of renewing interiors, dating back to the 18th century. We are proud that our visitors can today see the interiors of the last of the Vyshnivetsky princes.
Це колекція портрета з Львівського історичного музею і колекція меблів з музею етнографії Академії наук України, так само зі Львова.
In addition to museum exhibits on temporary display, there are permanent ones located on the ground floor in Vyshnivets Palace. In this hall of Vyshnivets Palace, there is a stationary exhibition that displays items of so-called Ternopil culture. It is one of the oldest cultures to be identified as living on the territory of modern-day Ukraine. These excavations were carried out in the village of Bodaki near Vyshnivets. There, at the beginning of the 20th century, archaeologists discovered the Ternopil settlement, dating back to 4000 BC. Archaeological excavations continued for a long time, and the result was an expedition that worked there for several decades. Now all the items that were found in this village are on display in this exhibition. Very interesting items that it's hard to imagine were used 6,000 years ago. You can see the beauty of the hall by buying an entrance ticket, but of course it is better to book a tour with a professional guide and discover lots of interesting details and stories. The next hall is also a stationary exhibition. Here we have sacred things, icons, church items that were presented by different communities. These things got a second lease of life here, because some of them were in a very poor condition. Our restoration artist, Vladimir Mahinsky, works in Lviv and collected some things that were just in pieces, restored these icons, on which there were several layers of modern paint. All this had to be removed in order to reproduce the original scenes, and visitors to the Vyshnivets Palace are able to see this work today. Of course, each thing has its own interesting story. All you need to do is come and take a look. So don't hesitate and be sure to visit. Well, if you come independently, researchers will willingly agree to tell you about the palace, about its once magnificent collections, and about its princes and hetmans. There is still an old church near the palace. The remains of the Vyshnivetsky princes, the powerful princely family of Ukraine's founders, are preserved here, inside the altar crypt. Right now, we found ourselves on the territory of the Ascension Temple. This is an architectural monument dating back to the early 16th century, built in 1530. The temple was transformed and built in 1872. It is, among many other things, also part of the spiritual heritage of this land. Many people come here to pray. Vyshnivets was at the epicenter of military clashes between Turkish, Tatar, Cossack and Russian troops, with troops fighting for the Polish crown. The church survived, although some changes did take place in it. The uniqueness of our church is in the fact that it is ancient with its old appearance, its architecture. It attracts people who want to feel the spirit of antiquity. Here there were precious icons donated to the Vyshnivetsky princes or brought back by them from various military campaigns. Unfortunately, very valuable icons weren't preserved as the temple was looted, and during the Soviet era, in the early 1990s, the church was renewed thanks to the efforts of the local community. Restoration is taking place here now, and local artists are painting the church chapel. This church is in fact very old, and at the moment there are new modern methods that combine architectural antiquity and modern painting.
Все в історії піддається тлінню, і час від часу храм потрібно доглядати.
We need to look after the temple and maintain it in the proper condition. And yet from the point of view that people are changing, this painting makes it possible to reveal more to the souls of people before God, to feel the beauty of icon painting, to feel the beauty of spirituality.
Красоту іконопису, відчути красоту духовності.
As we can see, one of the local artists is working in the church. This is Pavlo Bas, who has been involved in the restoration and painting of Ukrainian churches for many years. You know, I often pay attention to churches and temples painted by contemporary artists. They write in a modern style, and church icon painting generally doesn't correspond at all to the spirit in the church.
Осучасні, пишуть більш в такому сучасному стилі церковний іконопис і взагалі розпис. І він не цілком відповідає церковному духу. Можливо, це є така у своєї точки зору.
Perhaps this is my own opinion, as I studied icon painting from masters of the old school. And I know that it was very important for old masters that the church corresponded to these spiritual colors, so that the colors are balanced, both the ornament and the painting. So all of this was like one ensemble.
Кольори були врівноважені і в орнаментах, і живопис, щоб відповідав орнаментах, щоб це було як один ансамбль.
A good artist and good icon painter tries to do it like so. But when the color is broken, even the overall painting in the church is not perceived properly. It should be like music, you see? Pavlo Bas, in addition to painting places of worship, is working with canvases. So we asked the artist to show us his work and visited him at home. I understood in the early 1990s that it was the time to create some of my works, but that wasn't so straightforward, because, first of all, I had to decide exactly what do I want to paint. It was such a creative search. In the early 1990s, I stopped my search at an art called Surrealism. In the space of a few years, I created about 10 paintings. But in the process of this work, I not only painted pictures, but attended studies with friends. I felt that realism is closer to me, somehow more to my liking. I tried to draw not just sketches, but pictures in such a realistic direction, landscapes of my city surrounding villages. I recently tried the genre of painting portraits. Although I do not feel like a professional in portraiture, but something is happening. I'm doing this for my relatives, friends, acquaintances, people who I know well. Here you can see a portrait of my daughter, my wife, my friends.
Сакральне мистецтво, реалізм, сюрреалізм.
The church of Saint Stanislav is located on the right bank of the River Horyn, in Old Vyshnivets. It can be seen clearly from the Prince's Palace. This holy place was built after the death of members of the Vyshnivetsky clan.
Цей костел був збудований у 1757 році. В той період,
This church was built in 1757, at a time when Vyshnivets belonged to the Mniszczyk family. Unfortunately, the church was destroyed during World War II. Obviously, in Soviet times, nobody was bothered to restore it. But not so long ago, representatives of the Memory and Love Charity Fund contacted us and told us that Andriy Savchuk, the head of the fund, promised he would do everything possible to ensure that this ancient monument of architecture on our territory would be not destroyed. Residents of modern-day Vyshnivets understand that their glorious ancestors once built for centuries, and now they should save what remains for their descendants. New buildings, squares, stadiums are being built in the town, and yet Vyshnivets is known first and foremost as the family nest of the glorious Vishnivetsky prince family of Volyn. And this will always be so. We have visited some interesting places of our Vyshnivets today. We got to know the small homeland of Baida Vyshnivetsky, the founder of the Zaporizhia Sich. Let's visit the cozy place and try a few tasty dishes. If you want to try some traditional dishes of the local cuisine, then you're welcome to do so. In the meantime, you can examine the interesting interior of this establishment. There are lots of rare exhibits. Well, it's like a restaurant and museum rolled into one. This is our speciality: potato pancakes with mushrooms. Bon appetit! Thanks! They say the local potato pancakes with mushrooms are simply delicious here. They are baked with cheese sauce and served in a pot. Potato pancakes with mushrooms are really very tasty. It's worth coming to Vyshnivets not only to visit the prince's family residence, to enjoy wonderful landscapes, but also to try some delicious dishes. We look forward to seeing you in Vyshnivets. Travel around Ukraine, discover new cities and tell the whole world about them. Let every journey be bright and unforgettable.